Let me start today's message with a tale that echoes through history, a tale of a man who was so powerful, so feared, and yet so utterly alone that his name became synonymous with paranoia, cruelty, and ultimately, a self-constructed prison of his own making. That man was Joseph Stalin. Now, I want you to imagine something for a moment. You're one of the most powerful men on the planet. You've climbed your way to the top of a ruthless system. You've outlasted your rivals, purged your enemies, and rewritten the rules of an entire nation. But with every ounce of power you've gathered, there is one thing you've sacrificed, bit by bit: connection. Stalin did not trust anyone, not his friends, not his allies, not even his doctors. In his final days, he lay dying on the floor, paralyzed from a stroke, and the people in his home were too terrified to enter his room. Why? Because they thought if they disturbed him, and he wasn't actually ill, he would have them executed for waking him. Let that sink in. This is not just a story of power. It is a story of isolation. Of building a fortress so thick, so impenetrable, that even those who might help you can't reach you anymore. This, my friends, is the danger of isolation. This is the essence of Law 18 from Robert Greene's The 48 Laws of Power. Do not build fortresses to protect yourself. Isolation is dangerous. Now let's dig into this. Not just to understand it intellectually, but to truly feel it. To internalize it. Because in life, in business, politics, relationships, even personal development, this law is not just about avoiding being lonely. It's about staying relevant. It's about staying powerful. Why do we build fortresses? Not just literal castles with high walls and moats, but the emotional, psychological, and social fortresses we hide behind? We do it for protection. To keep threats out. To feel safe. We isolate ourselves in echo chambers. We surround ourselves with only those who agree with us. We refuse to delegate. We cut off the world, thinking we're protecting our peace, our strategy, our control. But what are we really doing? We are disconnecting from reality. We are blinding ourselves to the flow of information, the dynamics of people, the pulse of the crowd. And in the very act of trying to control our environment, we are losing power over it. When you isolate yourself, you become less informed. When you're less informed, you make poorer decisions. And poor decisions, in the world of power, are fatal. Power is not about control. Power is about awareness. Think about it. The most influential people, whether in history or in your daily life, are not necessarily the smartest or the strongest. They are the most informed. They know what people want. They know what people fear. They sense shifts before they happen. They anticipate moves before others make them. And how do they do that? By staying connected. By remaining in the mix. By listening, watching, engaging, even when it's uncomfortable. Now imagine someone who cuts themselves off from all that. Imagine a CEO who stops listening to customer feedback. A political leader who silences all opposition. A partner who refuses to have hard conversations. They are creating silence around them, and in that silence, they lose touch. It's only a matter of time before the world changes and they are the last to know. Because they built a fortress, and inside that fortress, the walls echoed only their own voice. Let's look at some real-world examples of this principle at work. Consider Blockbuster. Yes, the once mighty video rental empire. At its peak, Blockbuster had over 9,000 stores and dominated home entertainment. But when streaming platforms like Netflix emerged, Blockbuster was too insulated. They were too wrapped up in their own success. They ignored the shift. They stuck to what they knew. They isolated themselves in their old business model. Netflix even offered to partner with them. They laughed it off. Well, no one's laughing now. This is what happens when you build a fortress around an outdated idea. You shut out innovation. You shut out warning signs. You mistake comfort for stability. And let's not forget Marie Antoinette, the queen who famously, and perhaps apocryphally, said, "Let them eat cake," when told that the peasants had no bread. Whether she actually said it or not doesn't matter. The legend lives because it represents the ultimate example of someone who was so disconnected from reality, so isolated in their palace, that they couldn't comprehend the suffering outside their walls. And we all know how that story ended. Now I want to bring this into our everyday lives. Because let's be honest, we live in an era of digital fortresses. We curate our social media feeds to show only what we want to see. We block, unfollow, mute. We avoid difficult conversations. We label disagreement as negativity and retreat into self-care bubbles that are really just fortresses in disguise. Now, don't get me wrong, boundaries are healthy. Solitude is powerful. But isolation is a different beast. When you isolate yourself, you stop growing. You stop challenging yourself. You stop evolving. You begin to think your perspective is the only one that matters. You start to believe that your fortress isn't just safe, it's right. But that's how leaders fall. That's how relationships die. That's how innovators become obsolete. If you want to maintain power, not just grab it but hold on to it, you must stay connected to the world. Even when it's messy. Even when it's uncomfortable. Even when it threatens your ego. There's a lie we've been sold. The lie that vulnerability is weakness. That if you open yourself up to people, to opinions, to criticism, to collaboration, you're giving up control. But the truth? That's where real strength comes from. Let's talk about Abraham Lincoln. When Lincoln was assembling his cabinet, he didn't surround himself with yes men. He brought in people who had run against him. People who had criticized him. People who had opposing views. Why? Because he understood something powerful: opposing voices sharpen your strategy. They keep you humble. They keep you sharp. They keep you aware. Lincoln didn't build a fortress. He built a forum. And in that forum, he built power. So how do we avoid the trap of isolation? How do we apply Law 18 in a practical, powerful way? First, stay accessible, but not overexposed. Don't disappear behind gates, literal or metaphorical. Stay accessible to the flow of information, to people at every level. But be selective. Listen more than you speak. Observe without always being observed. Second, surround yourself with challengers. Don't surround yourself with people who just nod and smile. You need people who will tell you the truth, even when it stings. Especially when it stings. Third, go where the action is. Don't just lead from the top. Get on the ground. Be present. Be visible. Power is lost when it becomes invisible. Stay in the mix. Fourth, create networks, not walls. Build alliances, not walls. Build partnerships, not policies. Power flows through relationships. The more connected you are, the more leverage you have. Fifth, maintain emotional intelligence. Don't shut down emotionally to protect yourself. Learn to navigate emotions strategically. Connection is not just about information, it's about empathy, influence, and intuition. Let me close with this. We are living in a time when it's never been easier to isolate ourselves, and never been more dangerous to do so. The world is fast. It's unpredictable. It's loud, chaotic, and sometimes harsh. But retreat is not the answer. Disconnection is not the solution. Your fortress, whatever form it takes, may feel like protection. But in truth, it's a prison. So I challenge you today to look at your life, your work, your relationships, your mindset, and ask, where have I built fortresses? And what am I missing because of them? Because in the end, the most powerful people are not those who shut the world out. They are the ones who know how to stay open without being overrun. They are the ones who stand in the storm, not behind walls, but in the arena. They are the ones who walk among the people, not to control them, but to understand them. They are the ones who remember, power does not come from retreat, it comes from connection. So don't build fortresses. Build bridges.